Shabbat Shalom. Let me remind you, if I may, where we were last week. I mentioned to you then that it is my privilege, the challenge that they give the new rabbi in the congregation to give not one, not two, but 3 sermons about this part of the Torah, where it seems to take a turn towards the difficult. That's what they do to new rabbis. In England, they teach us that challenges are to be taken up, and so I have. And last week, we looked at the wonder of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the tented structure that is built by the children of Israel in the desert. And last week, at length, we dealt with the shape and the structure of the Mishkan and its furnishings, what's to go inside it. And this week, we're going to turn to the matter of staffing and personnel. And in particular, as Rabbi Bernhard mentioned, we're going to be looking at the character of Aaron, Moses' brother, who is going to be elected the high priest and who will be its main officiant. So it looks as though we're transiting from architecture, what the Mishkan is going to look like on the outside, to the ritual that is going to go on inside. And indeed, there are 3 main elements in this week's Torah reading. The priests are selected, and then a lot of instructions are given for how to make their clothing. And then further instructions are given, again, considerable detail, for how they're going to be consecrated. But this is the Torah, and it's not an IKEA instruction manual, and it's not People magazine, and it isn't that simple. And there are 2 main challenges in this week's Torah portion that point us towards a deeper reading in order to truly get what its message is for us. The first is that the name Moses does not appear in this Torah portion. This is the only Torah portion for which that is true in the whole of the Torah, from the time that Moses is born to the time that the Torah ends. And the absence of his name from this Torah portion suggests, perhaps, that there might be something new here for us to learn. The second thing is that this is, without doubt, one of the hardest Torah portions to chant. They vary in difficulty. People who read Torah regularly know this well. For some of them, the notes are fairly intuitive. If you don't exactly know where you're going, you can hazard a guess. You'll be right around about 80–90% of the time, normally, if you're an experienced Torah reader. But for today's reading, that really is not true. The notes are unusually ornate. They're tricky. They're counterintuitive, and they keep wiggling away from you. Now, you wouldn't know any of that unless I told you, because Noah read it so beautifully, but I assure you that the problems are there. And with those problems, the Torah is drawing attention to itself. Because in order to follow the complexity of those melodies, the Torah commands that we listen very, very carefully. Now, last week, we discovered a narrative that is not what it seems. We discovered that immediately under the surface of these instructions for making furnishings and making a building, there are discontinuities of time and space. The truth of the Mishkan, I suggested last week, seems to lie beyond the face of the text, beyond the details that we are given. And we need to read it sensitively, and I suggest that the same is true this week. Last week was not, as I hope I proved, the IKEA catalogue. This week, I hope to prove that it's not People magazine either. This is not a magazine that we're reading in our doctor's waiting room. So let's begin to explore. First of all, the wording of the instruction to Moses about how to begin the priesthood is very specific. He is told to bring forward Aaron and his sons to be priests, and Aaron and his sons are then mentioned again by name. And then the instruction is given to make Aaron his official clothing, his garments in which he will minister as the high priest, and a purpose is given. Those garments are to be for splendor and for beauty. Great. Something is off. Rabbi Matis Weinberg points out that one of the many strangenesses of this portion is that last week we had architecture. This week we get people. You would then expect that the story would continue, but it doesn't. We get another piece of architecture. And that piece of architecture is the golden altar that is going to stand immediately outside the Holy of Holies, bang in front of the curtain. It's as if it were right here. And that is an altar that is going to belong, as we will discover, to Aaron. And the purpose of that altar is to burn incense. And the recipe for the incense is going to be given at the beginning of next week's Torah portion, and we are commanded that it is unique, that nobody is to use that incense for perfuming themselves, that its sole purpose is to perfume this building, the Mishkan, to fill it with scent, to fill it with cloud. And Rabbi Weinberg also points out that this Torah portion does not begin with the selection of the priests as you would expect. It begins instead with the commandment that Aaron, nobody else, light the golden menorah. Aaron in person. And I would add that the clothing that is to be made for Aaron is listed in an order that we would not expect. If you're dressing somebody, you tend to dress them either from the inner layers outward or, as we say in the idiom, from head to foot. But the order that is given is neither. Instead, whenever we are told about this clothing, we are told first about two pieces of it. Something called the ephod, which is a kind of apron-style arrangement for the upper body with straps that go down the back. And also the breastplate, which was made of gold, which was set with gems, and which is attached, as Noah read in her Torah portion, which is attached to the ephod. It never moves away from the ephod. And Rabbi Weinberg argues that the reason for this ordering, the selection of the priests, the clothing of the priests, the consecration of the priests, and then another piece of furniture, is because the priests, and Aaron in particular, are not just staff who clock in the morning and clock out again in the evening. These priests, this family, and Aaron himself in particular, is an integral part of the structure and function of the Mishkan. He is the filament in the light bulb. He is the soul of the building. Without Aaron, that building will not switch on and do what it needs to do. And it's Aaron the person that makes that possible, not Aaron the priest, Aaron the person, his personality. Rabbi Bernhard already told us a little bit about this man and what happened to him in his life. We first meet him just after the burning bush, when Moses is told, having complained that he is not eloquent, that Aaron, his brother, will come and will speak for him. And we are told, as Rabbi Bernhard mentioned, that Aaron will do that and will be happy to do it. He does. And indeed, he does some of the speaking in front of Pharaoh. And indeed, he helps out with some of the plagues. It is Aaron who is left in charge of the people when Moses goes up the mountain for 40 days. And it is Aaron who throws the people's golden jewelry into the fire to produce the golden calf. It is Aaron whose two oldest sons die mysteriously in a single moment on the day the Mishkan goes live. He complains later in his life about Moses' marriage, and he prays for his big sister's recovery when she is punished for making the same complaint, though he, it appears, is not. And at the end of his life, he appears wordlessly to acquiesce to Moses' demand that he and his son ascend a mountain, Mount Hor, and die there. And he is mourned by the whole community for 30 days. And that's what happened to Aaron in his life. But who was Aaron? What was he like, and what were the qualities that make him, uniquely him, eligible to be the soul of this building? Well, the Torah tells us, at that moment, at the burning bush, there is your brother Aaron the Levite, says God. He, I know, speaks readily. Even now, he is setting out to meet you, and he will be happy to see you. And the Hebrew is v'samach b'libo. He will be happy in his heart. And out of this, the rabbis weave a whole backstory for what Aaron as a person was like. Rabbi Hillel teaches us that we should be like the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving humanity and bringing it close to Torah. And the Zohar, our Kabbalistic Torah commentary, goes further and explains how if two people were arguing, Aaron would mediate. He would go to one of them and explain how sad their friend was that they had argued. Then he would go to the other person and tell them exactly the same thing, so that when the two people met again, they would fall into each other's arms and make up their quarrel. But I think there is even more to it than Aaron being a peacemaker. Let me offer some ideas about why this is the man who becomes the soul of the Mishkan. Aaron is happy in his heart, and perhaps this explains the strange order for his clothing that I mentioned. The ephod and the breastpiece always come first in the list. The ephod and the breastpiece lie over the heart. The ephod represents the people. There were two precious stones on its shoulders to symbolize the people. And the breastpiece represents the 12 tribes lying over the heart on which they lie, Aaron's heart. For Aaron, the heart is always going to come first. Aaron was happy in his heart. We know that his role in the Mishkan is centered around lighting the space with the golden menorah and filling the space with the scent of the incense that he and only he is to offer once in the morning, once in the evening. For us human beings, we know that we need to stand reasonably close to something in order to be able to smell it. That incense altar is a symbol of Aaron's capacity not just for personal sweetness, but it also hints at a deeper language of intimacy. Aaron was happy in his heart, and it's interesting to notice the way that he and Moses exchanged their roles. Moses starts as the one who can't speak. Aaron starts as the speaker. But as the Torah unfolds, Aaron moves away from spoken language. He becomes more silent. Moses speaks more. So by the end of the Torah, it is Moses who is narrating the whole of its last book, the book of Deuteronomy. And I'm reminded of a piece of video that I saw this week where Itai Talgam, who is an Israeli conductor, used clips from the work of various orchestral conductors to teach people about leadership. And Talgam concludes that conducting an orchestra is not about imposing your authority. Conductors who do that get fired, and pretty quickly. Instead, a conductor must lead from the heart. Nothing else will do. And his example is Maestro Leonard Bernstein. And so much so, he argued, did Bernstein lead from the heart, that his final clip is of Bernstein conducting the Vienna Philharmonic in the fourth movement of Haydn's 88th Symphony. And I put the word conducting in question marks because Bernstein doesn't use his arms. His arms are folded. He's holding his baton here in his right hand. Only his face is moving. It modulates through a series of the most beautiful expressions. And yet the orchestra surges along, and yet the orchestra is clearly enjoying itself, and yet there isn't a single beat out of place in the music. And it is so beautiful to watch that it just makes you weep. Leonard Bernstein understood the mystery of what it means to lead with the heart. And so did Aaron. Aaron is all about heart, and that is why the musical notes that describe him in this Torah portion are so exquisite, and that is why he, and only he, communicates with God through the clouds of incense. And that is why he is the one who is chosen on Yom Kippur to represent the people of Israel in bringing their heart, their communal heart, before God. And that is why he falls more and more silent as the Torah evolves, as if he realizes the limitations of speech, as if he knows that in order to truly lead, he must turn his energy elsewhere. This is his splendor. This is his beauty. This is what his clothes reflect. And this is why he is the soul of the Mishkan, a job that Moses could never have done for all his other qualities. And just to be sure of this, I computer searched the whole of the Torah, and the words Lev Moshe, the heart of Moses, never appear together. The heart is with Aaron. That is where the heart casts its vote. And leading with the heart is not easy. Aaron's own story proves it. He seems to have been unable to abide people being in pain or distress, and he gives in to their commands, their fetish for a golden calf, for a physical representation of God. When his sons die, he falls into a silence that might have lasted for years, and perhaps a tougher leader would have recovered sooner. But if you lead with your heart and your heart is struck, you have to wait perhaps many years for it to recover. And he makes no demur when he is asked to die. He seems to let everything, his words, his identity, fall away. At the very end of his life, all of his finery is stripped off so that his son can wear it, and he is left standing on the bare mountain in his linen undergarments, which are the same pieces of clothing that Jews have used for centuries and still use to clothe their dead for burial. He finishes his life perfectly human, perfectly vulnerable, perfectly himself, and he always was. What can we learn from Aaron? I think we can learn two things. Firstly, we should learn that we should not be fooled into thinking that our communal structures get built from the outside in. It doesn't work like that. The Mishkan won't work without Aaron. A Jewish community will not work without its people. We construct our buildings from the inside out because it's the only way that they can truly work. It takes an Aaron to switch the Mishkan on. It takes an Aaron to keep it running. And secondly, there is a deep lesson here about what it means to be a leader. All of those notes, all of those details commanding our attention, all leading away from the exterior, all pointing towards the heart. It seems that every day these days we hear about another crisis of leadership. And perhaps what we should take home from the Torah today is that being a leader isn't necessarily about power. It isn't necessarily about charisma. It isn't necessarily about mission. It might not even necessarily be about passion. Instead, when we lead, often it's a matter of the heart. Shabbat Shalom.